Welcome to our group presentation applying Walton's Categories of Art to Abstract Expressionism, created by Michelle Franz, Summer Keever, Jason Lancaster, and Misty Stratton. In this presentation, it is our goal to apply Kendall Walton's three art categories, standard, variable, and contrastandard, to the abstract expressionist movement, addressing in particular work by Jackson Pollock, Willem de Kooning, and Franz Kline. According to Kendall Walton, the standard features in any given category of art are the qualities that unite a piece of work with its like companions. These are the characteristics that are somehow expected or taken for granted, and they can contribute to a work: a sense of order, inevitability, stability, and correctness. These elements can range from the subject matter represented within a particular category, as in landscape painting, to the style of representation such as cubism, to the work itself, such as murals. When applied to a particular category or work of art, standard features can aid in the unification of similar pieces of work, and in some cases necessitate the forming of new categories when certain features become recurrent enough to be considered standard. In the category of abstract expressionism, there are several attributes which stand out as being standard within this category. First and foremost is immediacy of expression on behalf of the artist. Abstract expressionists drew a great deal of inspiration from surrealism and the idea of automatism, which is the practice of allowing the subconscious to express itself in an unrestricted manner. This concept is one of the predominant uniting factors within abstract expressionism, one of the few which can be applied to both action painting as well as color-filled painting. Abstract expressionism is unique in that it is divided into two distinct practices: action painting, which is comprised of highly energized canvases showcasing the movement in the artist's application of the paint, and color-filled painting, which canvases are dominated by vast fields of color, typically large in scale so as to envelop the viewer. However, despite this duality, for abstract expressionists, the authenticity or value of a work lay in its directness and immediacy of expression. For abstract expressionist Jackson Pollock, immediacy of expression was achieved through unpremeditated painting, which placed emphasis on the revelation of the artist's authentic identity through spontaneous creation and a decisive lack of preparation. This is evidenced in Pollock's Autumn Rhythm No. 30, completed in 1950, which consists of an unprimed canvas covered in a chaotic web of black, white, and brown dripped paint. Pollock was renowned for his method, which reveled in the seemingly random dripping of thinned paint on a canvas which was laid out on the ground. This technique allowed Pollock to move freely around his canvas, completely uninhibited and able to create impulsively. Fully abstract and steeped in energy, Autumn Rhythm creates its spontaneity and the expressive act of applying paint to a canvas. It is exemplary of what immediacy of expression meant to the abstract expressionists. In 1952, art critic Harold Rosenberg coined the term action painting and asserted that at a certain moment the canvas began to appear to one American painter after another as an arena in which to act. What was to go on the canvas was not a picture but an event. This statement posits an additional standard feature throughout abstract expressionism, and especially within the division of action painting. Abstract expressionists were concerned with the materiality of painting, with the act itself, the application of paint on canvas, and its ability to evoke emotion. Aesthetically, this can be seen in the visible brush strokes, and blatant impasto of Willem de Kooning's Untitled, created in 1958. The artist's presence is unapologetically evident in the highly gestural, energized lines and overlapping colors, a testament to his act of creation through this conspicuous application of paint. By leaving his process visible, de Kooning has left his essence tangible, and as such the viewer is able to feel his presence and the emotions transcribed therein. Finally, and perhaps the most recognizable standard feature of abstract expressionism, is a lack of objectively represented subject matter. Even when depicted images based on visual realities, the abstract expressionists favored a highly abstracted mode. While at times it is possible to draw some figurative references, especially when descriptive titles are applied to a piece, the subject matter throughout this category of art remains fundamentally abstract. In Franz Klein's Black Reflections, 1959, the artist has covered the canvas in broad gestural brushstrokes of color with an angular black mass dominating the center of the composition. While it is known that Klein favored urban landscapes and that architectural references can occasionally be interpreted within his work, Klein's depiction of his subject matter remains non-representational and as such thoroughly abstract expressionist. Variable features, according to Walton, are those perceivable features in a work that have no bearing on whether a piece is perceived as belonging to that category. For example, elements such as shape and color do not typically point to one category or another. As Walton states, the possession or lack of the feature is irrelevant as to whether the work qualifies for the category. Once again, looking at Autumn Rhythm, we can examine the variable features of color, shape, and texture. The color scheme is muted and neutral, and there are no recognizable shapes beyond the rectangular format of the canvas. While Pollock was able to create some actual texture in this piece by piling up the paint, causing the layers to create an impasto effect, none of these factors affect whether or not this piece belongs to the category of abstract expressionism. Franz Klein's Black Reflections is similar in its perceivable features. Yellows, whites, blues, and blacks again dominate the canvas, but these colors have no influence on the category that this work belongs in. There are no discernible shapes that are recognizable by the viewer, and again, texture can also be seen as a variable feature in this work. The paint is applied evenly throughout the canvas for the most part. Small areas of paint begin overlapping, thus creating actual texture, yet this has no bearing on the fact that this piece belongs to the abstract expressionism movement. Willem de Kooning's Untitled piece, done in 1958, can easily be compared to Black Reflections in its style, color, and overall feel, but the variable features once again do not dictate its category. Harsh blacks, reds, and yellows dominate the canvas. These can be described as being much more bold than Klein's example, but colors are not what places this work among abstract expressionism. Once again, we detect no discernible shapes, and once again we have the layered effect of overlapping paint creating a visible texture. The colors, the shaping of the paint, and the texture of the paint layers have absolutely no bearing on whether or not these works justifiably belong to the category of abstract expressionism. While these features are important to overall quality and individual feeling of each work, they do not serve as the qualifiers for categorization. Because abstract expressionism is such a broad style driven by personal exploration, it is difficult to isolate too many features that are contrastandard, which according to Walton would exclude a piece from being labeled abstract expressionism. However, there are a few. If a piece of art is strictly loyal to the visual representation of a pre-existing object, then it is not abstract expressionism. This is the root of most contrastandard features discussed in regard to abstract expressionism. Their paintings were often made up of lines, shapes, and colors not meant to depict a reality from the visible world. For abstract expressionists, non-representational painting could express spiritual and emotional truths in the most direct way. As a reference for contrastandard features, we could look at the work of Philip Guston, who began his career as an abstract expressionist painter, but his style evolved to the point where it featured more representational imagery and more dedicated to capturing the likeness of pre-existing subject matter. Therefore, during this point in his career, he was no longer considered an abstract expressionist and instead was labeled a social realist or neo-expressionist. His color palette and paint application may have remained consistent, but his introduction of such vivid visual representation disqualifies his later works. Pollock and Klein are excellent representations of the abstract expressionist field due to their lack of pre-existing subject matter. It should be noted that abstract expressionism emerged following the Second World War and into a Cold War social and political climate. The U.S. was characteristically very conservative in a lot of ways, paranoid in regards to external threats, like communism. It was precisely this climate that created a sort of paradox within the field of abstract expressionism itself. One scholar later reflected that it is ironic but not contradictory that in a society in which political repression weighed as heavily as it did in the United States, abstract expressionism was for many the expression of freedom. The freedom to creative controversial works of art, the freedom symbolized by action painting, by the unbridled expression of artists completely without fetters. In essence, the movement of and in itself was a sort of personal rebellion against the social and political climate. But there must be a lack of narrative and political content within a piece in order for it to be considered abstract expressionist. The movement was much more about personal investigation, the world within each of us isolated from narrative or politics. The abstract expressionists celebrated spontaneity and the exploration of self in large paintings bursting with free form and gestural brushstrokes. Pollock's dripping paint directly onto the canvas, as well as Klein and de Kooning's slashing of form and aggressive brushwork. Even Mark Rothko's color fields were sometimes gestureless, emphasizing the flatness of the paintings. His works were often monochromatic, stressing the two-dimensionality of the work, while other Rothko works incorporated multiple hues and values as a means of exploring the luminosity of paint itself. Color as content. The paintings were the reason for the painting, the object as an end to itself. A piece seeking to conceal the limitations or physicality of its materials was not abstract expressionist. An example would be Audrey Fleck's Queen.